Welcome to Marin Voices and Views. With Lawrence A. Strick, I'm Peter B. Collins. In our second segment today, we'll talk with Reverend Carol Hovis, Executive Director of the Marin Interfaith Council.
First, Peter, we're thrilled to have Kathrin Sears back with us. Kate represents the 3rd District as a supervisor. She was appointed by the governor in 2011, and she took the place of the late Charles McGlashan. She was elected to a 4-year term in 2012. She holds a master's degree in China studies, a doctorate in political science, and a Harvard law degree. We're not going to hold any of that against her. We're going to welcome her here, and thanks for coming to this show.
Thanks for having me.
And you asked us not to call you doctor.
Please don't. I might have to do a tooth extraction.
Supervisor, Marin has been roiled by public reaction regarding the housing and the planning process this year. Tons of press about it. In a lot of places, there's deep suspicion about the state and regional planning, ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments, and all the strife that's gone on. Have you been surprised about what's going on and the reaction that people here in Marin have to this problem?
Well, you know, I think I have been. I've been surprised by the strength of the reaction, and I've been surprised by some of the vitriol and the depth of the suspicion and the nastiness, really. There's many aspects of people's concern that I can certainly understand. I think, you know, really going back to our environmental battles of the 70s, coming out of that, I think that all of us who are here and those who have paid attention to our history in Marin have a very strong sense of the importance of local control. And you see those sentiments really coming out and at the forefront of a lot of the concerns about housing. So I understand that piece of it, and certainly on the Board of Supervisors for the last 2 years that we were dealing with the Plan Bay Area piece, there was a great push by members of our board and other elected officials in the county to make sure that the regional agencies really understood how important local control was to all of us, and to make sure that our local control over zoning issues was not going to be jeopardized by Plan Bay Area. So a lot of that, you know, that concern by people of wanting to make sure that we still had our local ability to apply our zoning as we designed it, to apply our design review, to apply environmental review, and really all the structures that our independent jurisdictions and our county feels are important, that none of that was jeopardized by these regional agencies in the regional planning process. And I think that was important, and the public input there was very helpful and very important. What I've been very disappointed by has been some of the level of discourse, and I think the fear that often was not fact-based, but you know, I think for any of us, when you get afraid and you get fear-based, it makes it that much more difficult to have a conversation and really learn about the issues. And all of these are complicated issues, whether it's the housing element, it's Plan Bay Area, zoning, any kind of land use planning is complicated. And then you have the overlay of some of these regional plans, and that makes it that much more difficult. But it's been, you know, the moments of breakdown in civility and the moments when people have felt that they could say things that really were very hurtful, and that's been disappointing. And I think we have a way to go to sort of reacquaint ourselves with the notion of the common good, and that's something that I feel very strongly about, and it's something that I hope to take action on next year when I'm board president.
So as I've watched this debate, like you, I've heard opponents who raised some very legitimate concerns. But in the exchange, the opponents, for the most part, simply wanted to stop everything. They wanted to bail out of ABAG. They wanted no priority development areas. It's as if they wanted to kind of freeze the clock and lock in the status quo. And in that context, we saw an attempt to recall your colleague, Susan Adams.
Right.
And they're now claiming victory because PDAs, these priority development areas, were removed from a piece of paper. But can you clarify for us, does the removal of the PDA tag, or in the case of the Golden Gate Baptist Seminary in your district,
Right.
Which is in the county plan labeled affordable housing overlay, and you actually opposed that in the vote at the board. But do these changes prevent all development in the future, including affordable housing?
So a lot of different ideas there, and so let's talk about the priority development areas, and that really comes out of Plan Bay Area. For the county, you know, our county designated a PDA in 2006. We were kind of at the forefront of thinking about what some people refer to as smart growth. I take us back really to the 70s, because Marin County has tried really since the 70s to make sure that we protected our open space and our ag lands, and that we focused what little development there has been, and I think what modest development any of us are expecting in the future, in our areas that are already zoned for development and where most of us live, so that we can still maintain, you know, it's 85% of our county is parkland and open space, and I think that's what most of us love about this county, and it's what a lot of our residents of San Francisco and the East Bay who come over here to recreate love about us as well. So just to take the priority development area, in some ways that's perhaps an unfortunately named zone. And as I've been talking to people about the PDA issue, because there is a lot of strong feeling about it, I say to people, you know, when I first read Plan Bay Area, I thought, this is a fabulous plan for areas. Let's take San Jose, let's take some Pleasanton, some of our areas in the East Bay where there has been more of a sprawl form of development. And I look at Plan Bay Area as kind of a policy guidance statement that says it's better for our communities going forward if we don't endorse sprawl, and we try to concentrate what growth any of our communities may have, as we've done in Marin, in areas that are already developed. So for the PDA, our areas that are designated as a PDA, you know, the only implication of that is it makes those areas eligible for transportation dollars. And that money can be used for a variety of projects. You can use it to repave your streets and deal with your potholes, bike ped projects, and then larger scale transportation projects. But it's a very, I think, useful pot of money. And you know, a lot of times people have said, you know, it's not that much money, why are we worried about it? I take a little bit of a different view as someone who needs to be balancing the county budget, and money, you know, there aren't that many sources of money. If you look at what's going on at the state, federal transportation dollars have been cut back significantly. I think it's important to seriously consider what are our funding options for the kinds of bike ped projects in particular that all of our communities want. You think of safe routes to school enhancements. Those are the kinds of projects that can be funded by having a PDA. Now, what people, I think a lot of the fear is, they see a PDA overlay or their community as part of a PDA, and they assume that that changes the land use zoning, and that's not the case. So, but let's shift over to Strawberry, because there is you know, the PDAs were designated to be on a half mile on either side of 101. The theory being, the part of the smart growth notion is, if you have people living closer to existing transit corridors, chances are the hope is, no guarantees ever in anything, but that that will enhance people's motivation and opportunities to take public transit. And so hence the half-mile band. And you know, some people say, well, I wouldn't walk a half mile. Well, even if you wouldn't walk a half mile, if you're driving half a mile to a park and ride to get on a bus, that's a much shorter trip than driving the 5 miles from a sprawl kind of development to get on public transit. So that has a positive impact on our greenhouse gas emissions. So we have the county has this band going up the 101 corridor, and it overlaps with some number of properties in Strawberry. And I think there was a lot of concern by people of, well, that overlay seems to come over my house. And does that mean that there's now going to be a multi-level apartment building, affordable or not, where my single family home is? And that's not the case. It really is only an opportunity to be eligible for this transportation funding. The affordable housing overlay is a different beast, let's call it that. So that's part of the housing element. And where that, the housing element has to be approved by the state agency, HCD, Housing and Community Development Agency, and there you actually have to plan, all our cities and towns and the county, we all have this requirement to a plan for housing at all different levels, from very, very low income to market rate. And so there was a proposal by our planners. There only one property in Strawberry was included in the housing element, and that was the Golden Gate Baptist Seminary property. The Baptist Seminary has had a master plan since 1984. And, they've done some development, and they have entitlements to do certain kinds of development that hasn't been yet been done. One of the existing entitlements under the master plan is 93 units of student and faculty housing. So our planners, when they were looking for sites to try to do this planning for different kinds of housing, the goal was to look for properties that were already zoned or already had an entitlement to build out. In addition to, and so they picked the seminary because there was that existing entitlement, and there was also an application, a development application on file with the county. And that application has now been extended, and so the property owner at the seminary has until the end of this year to resubmit a new development proposal. We can talk more about that if you want to. But so part of the proposal in the housing element was to do an affordable housing overlay on 2 acres of the seminary property, which is about 73.5 acres in total. That affordable housing overlay would change the existing zoning to 30 units per acre on those 2 acres. And it was a floating 2 acres so that a future development proposal could decide where they thought
One
it
of
was
the things,
appropriate.
you're talking about this and
Yeah.
using initials and
Acronyms.
acronyms.
Yeah. Oh.
And
Right.
it sounds to me that one of the big problems that everyone's having is, where do they get this information that they can make intelligence choices and understand it in a digestible way so that they don't just go crazy when they think that you're going to put the Empire State Building
Right.
behind Pendleton
Exactly.
over in Strawberry.
Right.
And I'm not sure
Yeah.
that we're going to be able to get there on this. So I'm going to change the topic
Okay.
a little bit.
Sure.
In July, there was a deputy sheriff was shot in Marin City. Was
No,
shot.
let me correct. He shot
He
the
shot
suspect,
somebody.
yeah.
He shot
I'm
somebody.
sorry.
Yes.
At a
Yes, he
traffic
did.
stop.
Right.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah. And there was some tension between the community and the sheriff's department. Nevada police were called in to do the investigation. What's the status of that? And is Sheriff Doyle, is he being apprised of this? And is he, are concerns of the community being met and listened to by the sheriff?
So, as you may know, and I can't remember the date now, I believe it was sometime in July, we had a community meeting in Marin City, and Sheriff Doyle had been on vacation at the time of that incident on July 7th. But once he was back in town, we convened a community meeting in Marin City that Sheriff Doyle attended, so that there was an opportunity for the community to ask questions of him about the incident and about the choice of Nevada to do the investigation, and to bring up other issues that the community had about how that incident was handled. And I don't know, I happened to see it as I was driving home from the fair that day, and it was a dramatic lockdown in that community that I think was very unnerving to many of the residents. And so it was the sheriff's explanation at that time that San Rafael and Novato are the 2 police agencies in the county of Marin who have the ability and the staffing to do those kinds of investigations. San Rafael police was already involved in investigating the case of an individual who died in the jail, and so it was the Sheriff's Department assessment that they were already involved, occupied with that investigation, and so it would be appropriate to send this investigation to Novato. Concerns were then raised by the community that the deputy's wife was a part-time employee. I think she works as a dispatcher in Novato, and whether that would, create any kind of issues for the investigation. At the meeting we have in Marin City, the sheriff, certainly explained his belief that he felt that Nevada police were a professional organization, and his certainly hope that there would be an objective investigation. You know, I wrote an article in the paper expressing the same thing. Obviously, what matters is a thorough and objective investigation of that particular incident.
And where does that stand right now?
And, you know, the district attorney's office has an investigator who is also keeping an eye on and I think participating to some degree. I don't know, I have all the details on that, but I know that they're keeping a close eye on the investigation. So it's my understanding that the forensic part of the investigation is ongoing. I mean, I think all of us are wondering at this point, it's been, you know, quite a period of time now, and I think we're all eager to see what the results of the investigation are. I think, you know, the sheriff's office is not participating. Once that investigation by the Nevada police is concluded, they will have their own separate investigation of whether their internal policies were violated. But my guess is that they're as eager for the results of that investigation as the rest of us are. But I don't have, you know, no one has told me when the end date is. I certainly hope it's soon.
In just about 30 seconds remaining, do you have full confidence in the sheriff, and do you support the call of some critics for a citizen review panel?
Well, so this was one of the positive outcomes of the meeting that we had in Marin City. And, you know, people have been pushing for an oversight board. There had been an advisory committee, it's my understanding, that the sheriff had created with individuals who I believe he selected. At the meeting in Marin City, the sheriff suggested that the community should put together an advisory committee of members from the community, and that is in process through the Community Services District in Marin City.
And your level of confidence in the sheriff?
So the other thing that I thought was positive in that meeting was there were folks in the audience who wanted to have input about best practices. And so I suggested at that time that I would convene a meeting that would bring together different experts on best practices so everyone could talk about that, and we could have sort of a large community and expert conversation about what are best practices and what are we seeing here, and are there training opportunities to improve what our sheriff's office is doing. And so I'm positive because Sheriff Doyle was very open with with those two items, and he's also been very open to enhancing the training that's given to his sheriff's deputies in terms of cultural competence and really best practices. So I'm hopeful.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Supervisor Kate Sears, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Peter, recently I was invited to join the board of the Marin Interfaith Council. It's an organization which promotes interfaith understanding, justice, and community building. Joining us today is the executive director of the Marin Interfaith Council, Carol Hovis, the Reverend Carol Hovis. She's an ordained Presbyterian minister and has served at Marin Interfaith how long?
9 years.
And before that, you were 6 years at the Canal.
Correct, at the Canal Ministry, yes.
Carol, tell us about Marin Interfaith, what you do and what its scope is.
So it was started in as a result of the January 1982 floods that happened, and congregations, particularly Jewish and Christian, came together to respond to the homeless who had lost all their belongings. And so in those early years, it was mostly Catholics, Jews, Protestants coming together, getting to know each other, and it's evolved over the years, and here we are almost 32, 33 years later. And we still are very focused on some of those same issues of bringing different religious communities together to address things that come up in the community, like homelessness, housing, immigration reform. Those have been some of the topics over the years.
So Carol, in our first segment, Supervisor Sears gave us a good discussion about the conflicts and the controversies over housing planning, affordable housing in this community. What would you like to add to that? Because we have seen tensions flare and some uncivil behavior on the part of some people on this issue.
I guess two ways that an organization like the Interfaith Council can really contribute to this is one, what you bring up about civil, respectful dialogue, because we have to do that all the time. We're bringing people together who historically don't always get along. Jews, Muslims, and Christians trying to figure out how to speak to each other and respect each other. So in terms of this recent housing debate. We believe we have some of those skills and abilities and hopefully a sense of common human dignity. But the other one that I think is important about religious communities is, and I think politicians realize this, is we have hundreds, sometimes thousands of members in our institutions. And so as a result, if we can talk internally in the congregations about these issues, you have people on all sides of an issue. Well, there's plenty of people in our congregations who aren't sure about a new affordable housing development going up in their neighborhood. And so if we can begin to have those conversations in smaller groups and help people to feel safe and be able to be heard, then at the larger level, we can actually make a difference in terms of giving political cover and political will to our electeds.
Mm-hmm.
Other projects that you have working in Marin include homeless shelters.
Yeah.
There's real needs that people have in an immediate way. Is that a big need in Marin, and how is Marin Interfaith working in that regard?
Sure. Well, there are others who can certainly give you some of the statistics and numbers that I would defer to. But for example, most people in Marin who know anything about homelessness know that Homeward Bound exists as an amazing nonprofit that was actually started by the religious community, particularly in Novato. And there are a number of different sites and now in Marin County that provide beds and housing for, I think the numbers, I hope I'm not way off, but somewhere in the 350 different persons, sometimes families and many individuals. But as you may or may not know, that doesn't begin to address the numbers. The recent count, every other January, there's a count done of those living on either in their cars, outdoors, or on someone's couch. And that number in the last time that census was taken was in at least 1,000 to 2,000 persons in Marin who are precariously housed or living outside.
On a daily basis.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
That was one day in January count. And that most people who are daily working with that community would say, yes, that is an accurate number. So what we know is that in Marin, we don't have enough, both shelter, as far as that first step for people who've been living outside, and I think most of us know we also don't have enough transitional housing and low-income housing, all the different, and then moderate income housing, getting up to that place where people who can afford larger homes.
And Carol, as we head into the winter months,
Yes.
Do you feel confident that we have enough in terms of shelter and short-term housing for Marin's homeless population?
I would say that no, this is something everyone who deals with this on a regular basis, we don't have enough, we haven't had enough, and that's one of the things that pulls at the heartstrings of many congregants. Now you probably are aware that for the last 5 years, there has been something called the REST program, which is the Rotating Emergency Shelter Team. And that has been hosted by 20 to 30 different congregations throughout the county. And it's been an amazing collaboration and partnership. And actually, it's more than 30 if you include those providing meals, rides, or actually transportation is provided usually by a bus. But in any case, that program will begin again, hopefully, if the funding and all the partners are at the table. That will begin again in November and go through the middle of April.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And REST is, what does it do? I mean,
good question. So those living outside know about the program, and they show up every day for intake. And if they are able to be in the shelter, about up to 20 women and up to about 40 men, about 40 men, maybe even 50 men. And there's, as you might imagine, many challenges figuring out the intake. And the bottom line is that in those numbers I just told you, there's still, after you house 60 each night, there are still hundreds who are not being housed.
so there are folks who sleep in a church or a synagogue.
Correct. On the floor, in a sleeping bag, sometimes maybe on a blow-up mattress.
It's important work.
It is.
And we do have some communities, I won't name the one with 4 letters that has the highest level of wealth in the county, but they have resisted participating.
Yeah, and to speak in favor of, there have been congregations, particularly an Episcopal church in that community, that's been very much wanting and has participated in the REST program. But you are correct that a number of years ago when they talked with their neighbors about the possibility of actually hosting folks in their building, that they did get quite a bit of pushback.
And one of the fundamentals is that being homeless is not a crime, but there are people who conflate homelessness with criminal behavior.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that's so powerful about this REST program is hundreds. I mean, I think the numbers are maybe a couple of thousand congregants have been involved each season as volunteers. And this past couple of years, you have congregants who actually are serving a dinner and sitting down at a table with someone they went to high school with.
Yeah.
So people are having these personal experiences of people they've known in their life who are now living outside. So the recent recession, there's lots of reasons that people end up outside.
Yeah.
And certainly criminal activity is a percentage, but it's by no means, I mean, like any community, there's criminal activity. It's not so much about income.
Next month, November, Marin Interfaith is having a big event.
Yes.
Tell us what you're doing and how can people get involved?
So it's called Visionary Marin. This is our 8th annual event. It's our largest fundraiser of the year. And we every year honor an exceptional visionary who's contributed to the betterment of our world. And this year, it's kind of fun. We are actually honoring 2 visionaries. And part of the reason is that these 2 women, Sister Marin Irvine of the Dominican Sisters and Ms. Ethel Siderman.
My friend Ethel.
Yes, co-founder with her husband Stan many years ago of the Fairfax San Anselmo Children's Center, also one of the co-founders of the Parent Services Project in the Canal. Ethel and Marion, both in their 80s, have been best friends for the last 9-10 years, and it was through Marin Interfaith Council that they met. And so we decided we wanted to honor them as a model of interfaith friendship. And so that night, it will be at Thursday, November 14th.
There you go.
6 o'clock at the Mill Valley Community Center. It's 6 to 8. And there'll be all kinds of wonderful appetizers, good food and drink, and then a program where the 2 of them are going to be interviewed. And we get to dive a little bit more deeply into who they are and how this friendship has come to be.
Well, that's exciting, and I will definitely be there to honor
Great.
Ethel. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.